How would we know if someone's in severe dehydration? And I thought, oh my gosh, people can't even recognize it. I will tell you this, dehydration can kill very, very quickly. It kills young people and it kills old people in particular. I would say old people faster, of course, because their reserves are much lower. They don't have as many active stem cells. They don't have the healing benefits of youth. Things get real medicalized real fast, is my point. Hey guys, on this episode of the Dr. Tina Show, I am going solo from a hotel in Beaverton, Oregon. I am here, I had to fly in on an emergency to help my mom. And I think what happened with her and this situation is such an important story to tell you because it might save you or your loved ones. I'm going to preface with the fact that this is not medical advice. I am not an ER physician. I am not a gerontologist. I am not a pediatrician. I am a naturopathic doctor, and I have had ample experience for some reason in this realm. We're going to be talking about severe dehydration and what can happen to you and how you can pull you or your loved one out of it so that you can think straight and get the medical care that you so desperately need when this strikes. So that's going to be the episode today. I don't have a great mic set up. I don't have a great camera set up. And so we're just going to make do and bootstrap this together, as my podcast producer joked. He and I have been together since the beginning, and we used to just, God, the quality of things was, he always made it sound great, but you can only polish a turd so much. So please bear with me. But I think this really is something that nobody talks about and a lot of people don't understand, because I posted about it on my Instagram stories last night and I got flooded with a bunch of questions from people saying, well, how would we know if someone's in severe dehydration? And I thought, oh my gosh, people can't even recognize it. So we're going to talk about it today. And again, I'm not giving you, this is not medical advice. Do not use this instead of, okay? But sometimes we need to buy time. We need to buy a few minutes. We need to buy a few hours. And sometimes we have situations where we can't get to an ER. We can't afford an ER. Maybe the ER is way too far away. We have stubborn parents. We all have stubborn parents, it seems, who just say, leave me alone, let me die. I mean, it's terrible, but that's kind of what happens. And so my mom has given me permission to talk about this. I'm not going to go into too much detail except tell you that she experienced a bout of severe dehydration during an illness recently. And I'm going to share with you what that looks like in general. So this can happen most readily to children and to old people. I'll tell you how I think about medicine. When I think of adults, I think of dogs. And when I think of kids and elderly people, I think of cats. And let me explain. I understand dogs. I understand their physiology. I understand their behavior. I understand how to help them. I am amazing. I'm like, a part-time, I joke that I'm a part-time veterinarian. I can't take care of your animals, but I take really good care of my animals with naturopathic medicine. And I'm really good at it. And I'm really good at helping them when we need to. And with allopathic medicine as well. I'm really good with adults. I'm not great with elderly, and I'm not great with kids because they are like aliens. They have the same, but the one thing that makes it simple is the same rules apply to both. Meaning, and the cats are like aliens to me too. I don't have a clue. And when someone says, what do I do about my cat who's throwing up or whatever? I'm like, I have no idea. I do not understand cats. But I can tell you that young folks and older folks have a real hard time maintaining their temperature. They have a real hard time maintaining their hydration status. They get cold easily. They get hot easily. They overheat readily in the sun and in the hot weather faster than you will. This is why we have to take measures to be very careful with them. I kind of put them both in the same category of delicate, if you will. And I will tell you this, dehydration can kill very, very quickly. And when I think of elderly folks and chronic diarrhea or some kind of acute diarrhea episode, or maybe running out of both ends, the vomiting, you get a 24-hour bug, whereas, my husband and I can just barrel through it. My daughter can barrel through it. It kills young people and it kills old people in particular. I would say old people faster, of course, because their reserves are much lower. They don't have as many active stem cells. They don't have the healing benefits of youth. But in either case, both can decompensate very, very, very quickly. And we don't see it. And then the poor person is in bad shape. So I was not identifying over the phone the dehydration in my mom, but one of the first symptoms for her was dry mouth. And this was going on for a few days. So when you and I think of dehydration, I want you to think chapped lips, dry mouth. Now her mouth was so dry, she was having a hard time articulating. And I was like, I kept saying, what's wrong with your mouth? And I thought maybe she was swollen because she was dealing with an upper respiratory infection at the same time. It was hard to tell over the phone. And you might test the back of the hand, the skin, you would pinch it and it would tent. If it stays tented, they're dehydrated. If it snaps back quickly, they're well hydrated. Dry skin. I know living in Arizona has been a bit of a learning curve for me in that I noticed that my skin dries out really fast. And I mean, it feels all of a sudden rough and kind of chapped out of nowhere. And so moisture, I have to moisturize a lot, but more notably, I have to drink a lot of water. Something that no one is talking about that I talk about in my GLP-1 Done Right University course. First thing I teach you guys is, any of you who have taken it, first thing I teach you guys is GLP-1s make you not want to drink water. You forget to drink. So dehydration is a big issue with GLP-1 users. Just a little pearl there, whether you're microdosing or not. But dehydration can sneak up on you, and you might have a headache that you don't really notice. You're just like, why don't I feel good? That might actually get worse and get into a stiff neck. And suddenly you're like, why is my neck stiff? But I just noticed that I get a little headachy and I get a little grumpy and my lips get chapped. That's kind of my cardinal sign that I'm dealing with dehydration. Now, in the acute setting, meaning somebody who is vomiting and having diarrhea, that dehydration can happen very quickly, young or old. And I'll tell you, if you're a young person or a midlife person like myself, if your adrenals are shot to hell like mine are, it happens even faster because your adrenal glands secrete mineral corticoids, and those are molecules that help you maintain your electrolyte balance in your body so you don't pee it all out or sweat it all out profusely. And your glucocorticoids, which help you regulate your blood sugars and other things, those play together. I don't know if you guys remember back, a year or so ago, people were freaking out that there was the tiniest bit of maltodextrose in Element, the electrolyte product. I love Element. I promote them. They actually sponsor this podcast. But that is an electrolyte for active people doing active things. It's very high in sodium. And I'm not going to get into all the details because I haven't talked to the owner and I don't know why there is a little bit of maltodextrose. But when I heard that, I was like, good. And here's why. Because one, they need it as a flow agent so that it doesn't glom up and turn into a rock very quickly. You guys have had supplements that turn into rocks that are in powder form, and then, you forget about them for 3 months and you come back and they're rock hard. A little maltodextrin helps with that. But more importantly, we need glucose to drive our electrolytes into our cells. So these no carb, carnivore, no sugar people pounding electrolytes cracks me up. It cracks me up, you guys. I'm like, dude, you actually need glucose. That is how biochemistry works, is you need glucose to drive the sodium into the cell. You need glucose to help regulate the mineral status. That, I'm not saying you need to be pounding candy, but you actually need a little bit of glucose in there. So that leads me to the next point. If you suspect dehydration, even mild, so I just gave you the signs of mild dehydration. In a minute, I will share with you the signs of severe dehydration, especially in the elderly. But if you even so much as suspect mild dehydration, you're already behind the curve. And it's very hard to get back on the horse. We don't want to get so far behind in our hydration status that our electrical system is starting to fritz out. And this is why it becomes dangerous when you dehydrate quickly, because your electrolytes aren't just there for hydration's sake. They are your electrical system of your body. We are electrical beings. And when that electrical system starts to fritz out because the sodium potassium pump isn't working right, because there's not enough sodium and potassium, or there's too much, or the balance is imbalanced, then you run the risk of a cardiovascular event for real. And you guys have probably felt this if you've ever become severely dehydrated from running out of both ends. All of a sudden you get what's called tachycardia. Your heart starts beating very quickly, and it's terrifying. And it's happened to me more than once. And it is not lost on me that I'm doing this episode in a hotel room, because I have been at conferences and traveling for work multiple times where I had come across some kind of little gut bug and fell apart quickly in a hotel room alone on the floor, puking my guts out, thinking I'm going to die of a heart attack. I could feel my heart racing so incredibly fast. And the touch of an IV of saline, of normal saline, 9% normal saline, just the touch of an IV, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it was so severe for me because my adrenals were so brittle that I would actually travel with an IV bag for years. For probably 10 years, I traveled with a full IV set, and I would administer them to myself. Because if I started going down that path too hard because of my adrenal status, I would fall apart and decompensate very quickly. So that's another sign. That's a more severe sign, is when that heart starts racing. So if you've got someone, their lips are dry, they're like, my mouth is dry, they seem headachy, and they're telling you their heart's racing, or you take their pulse and it's going real fast, you have got dehydration happening. That's not good. You have to get on top of that. Some signs of some more severe dehydration would be not making sense. They just start not making sense. They might start acting crazy. I want to make sure I get this list for you. They might start acting real crazy, and they might become very grumpy. They might become adversarial. They might start obviously cramping, musculoskeletal cramping, but this sort of sudden onset of confusion, delirium, mania, maybe those extreme lethargy, stiffness in the neck, now stiffness in the neck can be meningitis too. So that's a whole other thing. Again, I'm telling you, we're not covering the full gamut here. I'm not an ER doctor, but they'll start to stiffen up, and we're looking at more severe dehydration then, especially in the elderly. It can happen so fast, you guys, and kids. It can happen so fast. So this is why we're doing this episode. And I know this isn't my normal content. And I know some of you are like, why are you telling us this, Dr. Tina? Trust me, everybody should listen to this episode. It will save a life. It might be your own, but it will save a life. I promise you, this information will come back to you and be of high value at some point. And you'll be like, thank God I watched that whole episode. In addition to that rapid heart rate, their blood pressure may bottom out. Now, you're not going to know that if you don't have a blood pressure cuff to check it. But signs of low blood pressure, fatigue, not wanting to get up, not able to regulate once they stand up. So they stand up and they get very dizzy. They might start walking weird. They might actually tell you they can't feel their legs very well because the blood pressure is so low. Rapid breathing. So they might be breathless, struggling to catch air. Now, if this is happening on top of an upper respiratory infection, you're thinking, oh, it's the upper respiratory infection that's causing the breathlessness. Maybe not. It might very well be the severe dehydration. The inability to walk, that's severe. This is very problematic. And extreme weakness. Now, you might also, I joke with my mom. Have you guys seen that SpongeBob episode where he's in Sandy's hut? It's all dry inside her hut under the ocean, and he completely dries out because he's a sponge, and his eyes are all sunken in, and she's like, SpongeBob, are you okay? And he's like, I'm fine. And he's completely dehydrated. When I walked in, I saw my mom. I was like, oh, you look like SpongeBob. We had a good laugh once we got her back to her hydration status, but sunken eyes, just dried out, literally. They look dried out, like a mummy. Think about the mummy movies. Remember back? Brendan Fraser. Oh, he was so dreamy in those movies. When, gosh, I love Brendan Fraser. When the mummy would touch somebody and they would like dry out and turn to dust, that's what you're going to start seeing. So they just sink, they become very sunken, and their eyes are like, sunken in and deer in headlights. Ironically, they will tell you they're not thirsty, and it's going to be hard to get them to drink. That's the oxymoron. That's a pretty severe sign. And so in those cases, you can offer them ice cubes. They might suck on ice cubes. This is why we give people ice cubes in the hospital, right? But this is what pulled my mom out. She should have gone to the hospital. Full disclosure. She absolutely should have gone to the hospital. I told her to go to the hospital. She did not want to go to the hospital. The neighbor was there. Thank God. Thank you for you. You know who you are. You saved her life. Literally, you saved my mom's life. We decided, because my mom was still cognizant, we decided that we would just give it a little bit of time to try to rehydrate her over the phone. I'm in Arizona. I'm trying to manage this and triage it. Give her a little bit of time to get her over the hump and see if she doesn't stabilize. And she did. She came around so quickly when we implemented what I'm about to share. She came around so quickly that I was like, okay, we will let you, because, let's be straight. When you put a very frail, very sick, elderly person in the hospital, it's a crapshoot. I'm not saying the hospitals aren't going to take good care of them, but it's a real crapshoot at that point, because you go in there, the chances of contracting C. difficile and pneumonia or MRSA is really high. So they go in and come out with a whole set of problems they didn't enter with. And you guys know as well as I do, things can become very medicalized very fast. And I cannot tell you the number of friends and colleagues who called me and said, my grandma went in the hospital for, we just wanted to rehydrate her with a couple bag, saline IVs or something really simple. And next thing you know, they're running extensive lab work and extensive studies. The bill's getting real high because what's Medicare going to pay for, right? And things get real medicalized real fast is my point. And next thing you know, they're suggesting these frail, very sickly, very weak people like get a stent or get some kind of cardiovascular procedure done. And it's like, are you kidding me? They're a weak, frail little dried out leaf. Like, we want to bring them home and sleep in their own bed. And that's the other thing. You get no sleep in a hospital. You get chronically monitored. You get woken up all night. You're usually in a room with other people. Right now, like, seeing as my mom had an upper respiratory infection, I didn't need her going in and getting something worse on top of it. So she didn't want to go. I'm not the boss of her. And we got her stable real quick. All right. So I'll leave it at that. But it would be ridiculous of me to tell you not to go get help that you need. You need to either go to urgent care or the ER when you are in the situation. That's not even a question, in my opinion. I knew I could get an IV bag in her quickly. I knew I could get on a plane and get here and get an IV bag in her quickly. And I knew that IV bag was going to be the critical piece in getting her over the hump. Had I not been available to do that, I definitely would have insisted she go to the ER. But we knew we had me on hand. I also had a vial of stem cells in the freezer for her. And we got those in her. And I knew that was going to change the game. And I know you guys don't have access to that. I just wanted to throw that in there for my own sake. So I wasn't being, blasé about the situation. So what did we do? If you Google the World Health Organization rehydration recipe, listen to me now. Google it, print it out, and put it somewhere that you can access quickly. Do not come running to me in my comment section or my DMs of my Instagram asking me what to do when dehydration strikes and you recognize it now. Go. I don't look at those things. I can't help you. I'm not your doctor. Go look it up. This is the World Health Organization's rehydration formula. This is what they use throughout the world. Yes. Could you have Pedialyte on hand? Absolutely. That's a wonderful idea. Could you have Gatorade on hand? Absolutely. I think those are great things to have stashed in the back of any cupboard anytime. But say you don't, and my mom did not. This is what we did. The rehydration formula is essentially 1 liter of water, 6 teaspoons of sugar, and a half teaspoon of salt. So that's the formula. And why so much sugar and such a little bit of salt? That's the big question. It's because you need the glucose to drive the salt into the cell. The glucose clearly is more important here than the salt. So heed my warning, pounding high saline only electrolytes. I'm talking not for athletes. I'm talking for the general public. When you guys are at home and you're sick and you're dehydrated and you go grab a packet of any popular electrolyte drink made for athletes in an athletic setting and you start pounding it, you may not be getting the right ratios. And that sugar part's real important here. And I'm talking in the case of severe, life or death dehydration. And this is the formula they use throughout the world. This is what they use when cholera strikes a village in a third world country. This is what they use throughout the world when they can't get IVs in people. So this is not a replacement for an IV, but this is really helpful when we need to get somebody stabilized. Now, this is why we then transport them to medical care, professional medical care. This is an interim treatment. This is in a pinch, if you will. And I have been in situations myself where I was alone and I was, like I said, on the floor, sick as a dog, and I didn't have my IV or I couldn't self-administer it because I was so sick. And so in that case, there's a doctor I learned about in naturopathic school. I forget his name. Oh, he saved, this has saved people all over the world. He basically did kind of a version of this, like a quick and dirty version. And he says, big glass of water, a fistful of sugar, and a pinch of salt. So maybe you can remember it that way better. So it's a big glass of water, a fistful of sugar, and a pinch of salt. And that is your, in a pinch, drink. And you sip on it. We don't chug it. We don't chug it because that can make them sick and throw up even more. There's a neurolinguistic link to the rest of our gut, meaning there is a brain-tongue link to the rest of our body. And it signals, I mean, in kindergarten terms, it signals our body to ready itself to absorb. And so if we start pounding that without that signal having adequately happening, then we run the risk of not getting optimal absorption from what we're trying to put in us. So I told my mom, swish it in your mouth, swish it around in your mouth, let your mouth hear it. We have different types of receptors in our tongue and actually throughout our whole body, in our guts too. Same receptors, crazy, huh? But it allows the brain to register, hey, it's coming, and we need to turn on those pumps, if you will. We need to ready the system. And so we want to gently and slowly reintroduce the hydration. Just because when someone's in severe, especially an elderly person is in really severe dehydration, their kidneys are at risk, their cardiovascular system is at risk, and in any age really, but particularly in the elderly, and we don't want to overload the system. So I was real careful to make sure she was swishing and sipping and swishing and sipping. And that suddenly turned on her thirst. And she was like, oh, I'm thirsty again. Okay, good. That's a good sign. I knew she was okay when she got mad at me. That's when she got ornery and got mad at me. I was like, okay, we're good. Like that is a really good sign when the person is like spunky enough to get feisty, right? And I was like, okay, she's going to be okay. She was sitting up. Her legs started working better. Everything was better. So I knew we had pulled her out of that extreme emergency. But again, this is the sort of in a pinch solution to get you to the next step. And that might save someone's life. Here's another pearl. One time I took my dad to the hospital. He had sepsis and it was bad. And they were going to make him wait in the lobby. And I said, no, I thought he was having a heart attack. And I said, I think he's having a cardiovascular event. So they whisk him right back. Here's a pearl. If you are suspect of having a cardiovascular event, you tell them that because they will get you right in. I personally got pneumonia once and thought I was having a cardiovascular event. They got me right in. So what they told me when I got back there was, if you want to avoid the actual lobby and the wait times, call 911 and get an ambulance. Now, again, not medical advice because I know ambulances can sometimes not be covered by insurance and you end up with an enormous crazy bill. But just so you know, this is what the doctors in the ER told me years ago. If you want to get somebody in fast because you are worried about a true cardiovascular event or like they're going to die, you call 911 and you get an ambulance there. I don't know how long the ambulance is going to take. So again, do not hold me liable for this. I'm just sharing with you what I was told, that you would bypass, but usually they take them in the back way. So they get right in and they gain entrance to the actual ER without having to come in, register, and sit in the lobby. That's just what I was told. So you take it for what it is. I don't want anybody having anything go wrong with that and say, well, Dr. Tina said. Just sharing what the ER nurse told me. So what happens from here? I was able to get a normal saline IV into her. I'm still having her drink Pedialyte because you don't just need all the saline, all the sodium chloride. You need the entire orchestra of electrolytes in balance in her. So we're working on that. And I want to see the appetite come back. This is something that goes away too. The desire for thirst and the desire for food goes away when you become severely dehydrated, which is hugely problematic. So that's the next thing that should turn on is, oh, I feel like eating again. And that's how you know you're on top of things. But for any of you who have been severely dehydrated, I'll share a story. I was 24 and I was pregnant with my daughter and I got a UTI, which is really common in the early stages of pregnancy for some reason. And what accompanied it, which I learned later in the ER is also very common, was severe hyperemesis. I was already having severe morning sickness. I was puking all the time, basically. I got the UTI. It really picked up. I had to get myself to the ER. I end up in there. They didn't even do an intake on me. They put me in a room. They put a saline bag, a 500 cc, the big ones, a 500 cc IV in me, saline IV, and ran that thing super fast because I was very young and I could handle a fast drip. Ran it into me super fast. And then he came in and he's like, oh, your blood pressure's still really low. changed out the bag, put a whole nother 500 cc's into me and ran it into me. And I ended up with 2 bags. Suddenly I had to pee super bad, which is a good sign. And that's another sign. When they have to urinate, we're good. We're getting there. If they don't have to urinate and you're putting liquid into them, please take them to the ER, meaning they're drinking the rehydration solution and they don't feel like they have to pee within an hour or so. They're not getting enough. We need to move this along. My mom, I don't think would have been okay with just the rehydration solution. All I'm sharing that for is because it will pull you out of the tailspin. That's all I'm trying to get across, is it will potentially pull you out of the tailspin to buy you time to get you to the next location or to get you into the next therapy that you need. And I'm not trying to talk you out of it. This is not instead of. Again, this is get yourself to the medical care that you need. But in a pinch, to get over that hump, she was so sick, and there wasn't any time. Like, I would have done this regardless of whether she was being transported to the ER or not. So anyway, I'm getting bags of saline back in my 20s, pregnant, super sick. Finally, my blood pressure comes up. And then the doctor said, okay, now I can evaluate you. So I was in such a bad state that he wasn't going to do anything until we got me rehydrated. And that's kind of the attitude I took with my mom, was like, she was in such a severe state that we had to get her some hydration back in her before we could make sense of what was going on and what to do. So I share all of that. Again, not medical advice. Do not hang your hat on this and avoid the medical care that you so desperately need in these situations. I know some of us after 2020 are a little gun shy of doctors and hospitals, particularly in this part of the country on the West Coast, but do not avoid getting the care that you need when you need it. However, this rehydration solution very well may save a life, whether it's a child's, an elderly person's, or you, the listener, just regular old, probably a middle-aged person. You might need this in a pinch. And if you are in a hotel or you're out of town or you're by yourself, you can grab sugar packets from, wherever. And I actually always carry salt on me. That's the part I want to leave you with in this episode. I call it my emergency salt. I use Redmond's Real Salt. It's one of their little bitty bottles. You can buy, I think, a 6-pack from their website. I'll make sure to have the link in the show notes for a discount. It's my affiliate link. And it's a little bitty vial of salt. And I carry one in every bag I have. I have it in my carry-on bag. I have it in my purse. My daughter has one. I give them out as gifts. Everybody I know that I love, if you've gotten a pack or if you've gotten a vial of salt from me, I love you dearly. Keep it on you. It's your emergency salt. You can refill it with your big Redmond's Real Salt. You can refill it with whatever you want. But having salt on hand, I can't tell you enough how miraculous salt is. Salt will, gosh, I'm going to tell you a few stories here, but salt will recalibrate you so quickly when you are in a terrible place. I don't care if you're on a plane having anxiety because you're flying, or you suddenly get dizzy for whatever reason, or you just don't feel good. I was on a hike the other day, and I had just myself gotten over a little bit of a sickness, and I was having a real hard time with the heat and the fact that I was constantly having to go up. It wasn't necessarily elevation, maybe it was, but it was just like it was a lot of bouldering, and I was gassing out, as I call it. I would stop and just put a little salt under my tongue, and then I was fine. I use salt during workouts. For those of you with POTS, my POTS girlies, you know what I'm talking about. Salt is your BFF. So recently had a client I was talking to who was having some potential cardiovascular issues, and I was sharing with them the same thing, like, try the salt, just try it. Just keep salt anywhere and everywhere. If you start to feel wobbly or unstable or you don't feel well, salt. Because you can drink all the water in the world. And in fact, my mom was drinking a tremendous amount of water, so she claims. It is not absorbing in some cases. And the real simple explanation is when you get so far into dehydration, this is why I have the swishing in the mouth thing. This is why mouth is important here. And this is why putting a little salt in your mouth actually matters, because it helps downstream some of the absorption to occur. So salt. And Redmond's actually makes rock salt. It's a cool mine. It's an old ancient, it's in Utah. It's an ancient, I've never seen it, but I can't wait to. It's an ancient seabed. And they sell the big rocks. And so I would break those rocks up into little regular size, and I have those stashed everywhere too. Literally at one point I had them all over my house because my POTS was so bad. And one of the great things I learned through kettlebell training was you have to learn to breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. in through your nose and out through your mouth, or just in and out through your nose, even better. And you can keep your heart rate and everything regulated really well. But when you have POTS like I do, you can go into tachycardia, which is high heart rate and low blood pressure real fast. And you're like, ooh, I got to lay down. This is why I love strength training, because you're not running, you're not doing any crazy cardio. You can completely stop what you're doing, put the weights down and lay down on the ground. I lay down on the ground and put my legs up and put my rock salt in my mouth. And my coach back in Portland used to laugh at me because I'd walk around the gym, breathing in and out through my nose between sets with my rock in my mouth, my salt rock. And my salt lick is what I call it. So, and it would force me to breathe in and out through my nose because I have a salt rock in my mouth, right? So it's actually a really great tool. And what you're doing when you're breathing in and out through your nose is you're resetting your parasympathetic and turning down that sympathetic. So you're calming the nervous system down, right? You can hum while you're doing it too. If you really want to throw in a little vagal nerve stimulation, which is a little icing on the cake there. There's the pearl for the episode. Rock salt, or rock in the mouth, or close the mouth with salt in the mouth, breathe in and out through your nose and hum. That has saved so many people. I cannot tell you how many times I have pulled the salt out of the purse and helped complete strangers with it on planes, in stressful situations, on hikes where, you know, I'm with someone or I'm with a friend and they're having a rough time and maybe they're post sickness too. One of my favorite things to do to get over a sickness is to actually go be physical, and in a controlled fashion, of course. And it just forces the lymph to flow, the blood to flow, especially if we've got some fibrosis in the lungs from an upper respiratory thing. That's when I really do employ cardio. I'm not a huge cardio fan, but that's really when I do think cardio is amazing because we're getting a lot of blood through there. It really helps break up some of that fibrosis. And salt is your BFF when you're trying to rebuild. So any of you coming out of like post-viral syndrome, long COVID, and I don't care what anyone says, we're seeing the data. People who can do some kind of really organized, contained exercise, I am the poster child for post-viral syndrome. And this was around long before long COVID showed up. They made a big deal about long COVID. I understand and I respect it is a huge deal, but there are a lot of us who have been struggling with post-viral syndrome. I almost died when I was 19 from a virus. I have had post-viral syndrome since. Trust me, I know what I'm doing here on this one. Salt is your BFF and so is exercise. And without the two, things can be very difficult to regulate your blood pressure and your pulse. So, and your breathing. So, a little bit of salt really, really helps, especially on the rebuild. I call it the rebuild. Any of you who have rebuilt yourself after a long bout of illness know exactly what I'm talking about. It's the rebuild for a reason. And it's a long, arduous process. And we have flares and we have stumbles along the way. And my mitochondria will never be what my husband's is because he has never been hit as hard as I have with multiple viruses. But yeah, you know, salt. Salt is an amazing tool, not just electrolytes. Yes, those are handy too. I'm not going to go into how to use electrolytes medically. I'm just telling you, a vial of salt or a salt lick in your purse or in your pocket can be such an absolute godsend. My husband works out on the farm in the summer and he will allow himself to overheat, and he will come in severely dehydrated and severely overheated. And I can tell because I chase people around and look at their urine and their feces all the time. In my family, like my daughter grew up and I'm like, let me look at your poop before you flush it, because I'm a naturopath and I can tell you a lot about someone's health by looking at their poop. And I know that probably sounds gross to some of you, but it's really an insight into what's happening in the body. And urine is a huge one. And so, I mean, obviously, that's cardinal, right? That's kind of my first sign of dehydration is my urine is too dark. Now, we don't want it super, super light either, but we don't want it that dark and smelly. And that's when I'm like, oh, I'm dehydrated. Most people aren't paying attention to that. And that's why I mentioned the chapped lips and maybe the headache or the dry skin or mouth. But urine's kind of the first sign, period. And his urine would get dark. And I was like, dude, you either have liver disease or you are severely dehydrated. And he would walk around like that until I have to harp on the guy. I have to really work on him. It's crazy how much I have to chase that man down to drink fluids and electrolytes. And with him, when you're exerting yourself physically like that in the hot sun for prolonged periods of time, you really do need electrolytes. Water alone is not going to cut it. And so with him, we stay on top of that now, and it helps so much. His mood is better. He gets so grumpy when he's dehydrated. So grumpy. That's how I know. I'm like, the urine's dark and the grumpiness is here. So baby's dehydrated. We got to work on it. So those are two big signs that might impact you. And then kind of the low grade headache. And he also crashes out in the evening, like crashes out, takes a shower, eats, and is like out, no energy. That's dehydration. So we are all running around really dehydrated. I have had so many patients. I'll share this and then I'll add a story and then I'll close. I've had so many patients through the years, you guys. My background, the majority of the work I've done in medicine is in regenerative injection therapies, and meaning people come to me when they either are trying to avoid a joint replacement, avoid cortisol injections, which just disintegrate your joints further, or are in pain. And I only treat active people because these therapies don't do well on people who are inactive and deconditioned and unhealthy. I don't care what anyone tells you. If you are an active person and you eat well and your health is in generally good shape, regenerative injection therapies are amazing. If not, then I think that it's pretty unethical to even treat the person, because part of the therapy is getting the body to induce its own inflammatory cascade and healing cascade. And I mean controlled inflammatory. That's how you heal. We're trying to induce that natural ability of the body to heal. And if someone's in such terrible health that they can't heal, they get a cut, they don't heal, they're just not in healing mode, then doing regenerative injection therapies and these are not covered by insurance. I think it's really unethical. But my patients were all healthy and active. And the one thing that I would ask on my intake, especially of men, was, how much water do you drink? And you would be shocked, you guys. Men in particular, for some reason, especially older men, don't drink any water. And they'd say, oh, maybe 1 or 2 cups a day. If your cartilage is a glycocalyx, for it to have bounce and slickiness, for it to be slick and bouncy, which is what healthy cartilage is, not degrading cartilage, not dried out. Think about a sponge that dries out. Does it get crumbly? Is it more apt to be damaged when you start scraping it? Yeah, right? It starts falling apart in your sink, on your dishes, especially when you put it up against something rough. Well-hydrated sponges have spring and bounce. Well-hydrated cartilage has spring and bounce and slick, which is what we want. So if you're running around chronically dehydrated and you're wondering why your joints are disintegrating and you're bone on bone, like, I'm not just talking about the pain. I'm talking about the actual cartilage degradation coming down to severe dehydration for decades in many people. Another sign of chronic dehydration is constipation. I mean, sometimes just getting people to drink enough water is what gets them pooping every day. It's crazy. So chronic dehydration is a different story. That's not a case where you would use this rehydration formula. That's a case where you'd use regular electrolytes and make sure that you're, drinking enough fluid, water. Different beasts entirely, but might as well throw it in here since we're talking about dehydration. But that chronic dehydration piece is a big deal when it comes to your joint health. So I just wanted to share that with you because it matters. And guess what I used for phase 1 of joint regeneration before I jumped to stem cells or PRP or any of this really expensive fancy stuff that all the doctors want you to do. We used dextrose. We used sugar water. It's called Prolotherapy. Not many people do it anymore. It's really a dying art, but a phenomenal treatment if you can find a real prolotherapist. And sugar water is amazing because it was concentrated enough that it had an osmotic effect and it would draw your cells to the region and wake up the stem cells. And dextrose also sits on your TRPV1 receptor, which downregulates pain, which is really, really cool. So anyway, it's just something to think about. But let me share a story. Salt, the emergency purse salt. I am at a bar, like a dance club bar in Boise, Idaho. This is during the pandemic. I flew into Boise for a conference. Boise wasn't playing pandemic, by the way. In Oregon, they were. I was in complete shock and, truth be told, extreme anger that we had been so lied to and so locked up and so just terrorized with fear in Oregon. I mean, I wasn't buying it, but everybody else was. And still, I just walked around the hotel. There were people outside getting into their cars by themselves with masks on here. That's still happening here. So I'm in Boise and people are acting completely normal. And here's a full bar club with a lot of young people, but we were at a conference. So there was like a bunch of different age people at this conference. And I'm like the oldest person. We're going through together. We're like different rooms. There's dancing. It's pretty fun. And we come out into this patio area, like this outdoor area, and there's a young kid, he's probably my daughter's age, and he's leaned over his hand, and the security's trying to get near him, and he's freaking out and he's screaming and he won't let anyone touch him. And his friends are all around him like, dude, calm down, but they're all wasted. And I guess he decided to do some break dancing, and some lady had dropped her glass and it had shattered on the dance floor, and she didn't tell anyone, and he sliced his hand open really bad. And so he's melting down, and all my friends are standing there, and I don't know what came over me. I just couldn't, like, he was my daughter's age, and I have a stepson who is the same age, and I just like, I went into full mom, Dr. Mom mode. So I grab my salt out of my purse and I tell my friends, hold on. And I come over to the young man and I squat down and I was like, hey, I'm a doctor and I'm a mom. Can I help you? And he, for some reason, agreed. He was like, okay. He trusted me. I was like, okay, great. I was just like squatting down next to him. And the security guard, I was like, hold on, dude. And I said, can you show me what happened? And he opened his hand up and it was just lacerated and he is bleeding profusely. And I said, oh, okay. And I said, can we put something on that so we can slow the blood down? And he said, yeah. And his best friend, this cute kid, they'd got to be like 22 at the time. This kid literally rips off the bottom half of his t-shirt, like the whole, but just the bottom. So he's got this crop top on. He's like, this is my favorite t-shirt I've ever had. And he rips it apart and wraps it around his best friend's hand, which was the cutest thing. So we got the blood flow, or the blood gushing maybe controlled at this point. I said, wrap it on real tight. Okay. And then I said, we got to get you to the hospital. And he's like, no. And so I pull my salt out. And because I could tell, like, he was white as a ghost and he was not doing okay. And I could tell he was starting to decompensate. And so I pull my salt out and I said, do you like salt? And he goes, yeah. And so I hand him the salt vial and I said, put some under your tongue. And he put some under his tongue. And I kid you not, he like sits up and comes to. Like, he just snapped out of it and he came to, and the color returned to his face almost instantly, you guys. I've seen this multiple times because, like I said, I did regenerative injection therapy in clinic, and patients would start to, get dizzy and go out on me. And it was like salt under the tongue, and they'd come to. So he comes to and he looks at me and I said, okay, lights are on, good. I said, can we call your mom? And he goes, yes. I said, do you have health insurance? And he said, yes. I said, let's call your mom. And he dials his mom, and his grandma answers, and she's completely asleep because it's the middle of the night. And he kind of starts crying a little bit and starts babbling, but he's still coherent. And she convinces him to go to the ER. And I was like, thank goodness, go grandma. So I said, okay, this gentleman, and there's like this huge security guard that's like, gorilla sized. And I said, this gentleman's trying to help you, so quit fighting him, okay? And he said, okay. I said, can we get you into an ambulance and get you to the ER? And he said, yes. And I was like, oh, great. Because he was refusing before and he wouldn't move and he was freaking out. And so I said, we take a little more salt, and he took a little more salt. I go, you feel a little better? And he goes, yeah. And the thing stops filling up with blood, the cloth. I'm not kidding. And I was like, okay, we're good. I said, you keep the salt. Let's get you in the ambulance. And the ambulance got there like that. We got him out of there. And I walked back to my friends, and all my friends were sitting there watching, and they were like, and I was like, it was just the salt, dude. It was the salt. So I will leave you with that. Your electrolytes really matter. I am a big fan of using electrolytes regularly, especially when we live in dry climates or we're sweating a lot, especially when we're elderly, so we can actually absorb the water we're drinking. But when it comes to acute dehydration, especially in the elderly, especially in children, do not forget the World Health Organization Rehydration recipe. I will make sure to link it in the show notes, or you can just Google it and read about it. So have sugar on hand and have salt on hand in your house, and make it easy to find, okay? So if you have to direct somebody to go do it. The second thing that I will emphasize here is that you might want to carry salt on you and give it a try. It's amazing. Now, for those of you who have high blood pressure and you say, I can't have salt, that's a bigger conversation, but your insulin resistance is driving your high blood pressure with the salt. Meaning when your insulin is high and you have insulin resistance, which 94% of US adults have, and you're pounding salt or you're using a lot of salt in your food, yes, it can raise your blood pressure. But the root problem is not the salt, it's your insulin resistance. So look further into that. My whole platform is about metabolic health. So you can go back and listen to lots of episodes about how to optimize your metabolic health. In a nutshell, eat whole foods, get plenty of protein, avoid ultra processed carbohydrates, strength train. That's how you create the muscle, which creates the transporters, which gets the glucose into the cells. You're creating a mop for your excess glucose, which will help your insulin regulate so it can be heard more properly. And then lastly, that emergency salt. That's carry something in your purse, carry something in your bag. If you are a dude, carry it in your pocket. You'll be shocked at how helpful it can be. And just try it. Try it in any and every situation where you don't feel well. I'm talking just the littlest sprinkle of salt. Suddenly it can be a game changer for people who it's right for. And it's right for a lot of people. So that's it. I hope this was helpful. Thank you for listening. I know this, again, is not my regular content, but this could save a couple lives at the very least. And when you suspect dehydration, it's already too late, whether it's you or someone else. The minute you suspect it and you're like, oh, I'm seeing the signs of it, it's too late. They are dehydrated. So getting some rehydration into them whilst you decide what the most appropriate route is for them and for you, get yourself, I would always say, get yourself to the ER so they can rehydrate you professionally with an IV, but that's up to you. So hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for listening, and make sure to review, rate, subscribe anywhere and everywhere that you listen to this podcast or watch it. I just hit 100,000 on YouTube. So thank you guys. That was all you showing up. I would love to grow this channel bigger on YouTube. So if you guys haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, and then you'll be alerted every time I launch something new. And if you are listening on podcast players, you can go ahead and leave a rating. This all helps the algorithm see that the podcast is popular, and it pushes it out to more people so more people can hear this, because I'm really just trying to bring you, I normally talk about metabolic health, hormones, menopause, peptides, et cetera. But if you're walking around chronically dehydrated, or you have a bout of acute dehydration, none of that stuff really matters, right? So this is the real important stuff. So I'll talk to you guys later. If you're going to take HRT, you have to go to the gym. You have to prioritize muscle. You have to prioritize exercise and movement. Why? Because the mechanisms where HRT can actually induce some level of insulin resistance, that's right, low hormones can induce insulin resistance, too high